What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to the latest edition of the Paul Heyman SmackDown podcast here on the Smark Out Moment channel. I'm your host, as always, Callum Wiggins, and joining me on this journey back in time, as per usual, is Robert DeFelice.
Callum, I'm so honored that you asked me to be your plus one for this amazing podcast that we're about to do.
Oh, there's so much to talk about on this one. This might be one of the most talked about and discussed episode that we're going to do on this entire series. It is full on for just one segment, really. The rest of it is just pretty much a standard affair, but there is one very noticeable segment which is going to take up a lot of discussion. But if you want to be joining in the discussion yourself, you can obviously leave a comment below. If you're watching on YouTube alongside us, leave a like on the video. Just all the other great stuff. And if you're listening to us through any of the other means, any of the other podcast feeds, then why not leave us a rating on there and then head on over to YouTube if you want to leave a comment. While you're on YouTube, if you're starting your journey here for some reason, and you want to go back to check out all the other episodes of the Paul Heyman SmackDown podcast we've done so far, then you can check out the playlist there. And of course, if you haven't watched this episode of SmackDown in advance of this episode, then there is a link in the description to the WWE Network episode of this, so you can check it out there once we have finished going through this. Or you can pause the podcast, check it out, then come back and listen to our thoughts on it. With that all out of the way, let's start with our usual topic, which is just some news and events that took place at this point in time. The biggest one is probably outside of WWE, which is in New Japan, a place that we sometimes like to visit from time to time, which is the arrival of one Joni Laura, also known as Chyna.
The China doll. She's doing the China doll in New Japan, right?
No, she's going by the name Joni Laura, I believe, at this point, still.
Oh.
Or at least she's referred to in the... I didn't actually check out too many of the matches, but I know she's been referred to that, at least in the Observer newsletters. I mean, maybe she's going with the China doll name as well. But
doesn't she pin Tanahashi or somebody really notable?
I don't know if she... I haven't got a full list of all the matches that she took place, and the one that I saw of the most prominence was that she had a singles match with Masahiro Chono on October the 14th, which he did lose that match, because at least they did something right with that run. But essentially the entire time that she's there from mid-September until the end of October, so she does a run there, and I don't say the whole TV, but a lot of the TV is surrounding her and her joining up with certain people in order to face people like Chono and Tanahashi. She does get into a feud with Tanahashi. I don't know if she beats him or not, because this is right at the very start of Tanahashi's career anyway. But
amazing crossover of worlds that you wouldn't think exists.
No, this is a very different time for New Japan Pro Wrestling, and not a very successful one.
Are we knee deep in Inoki-ism yet, or has that not happened?
It's not that far into it just yet. It's definitely on the rise, as we spoke about in the 2001 Wrestling Odyssey, that it is starting to take shape, but it isn't to the point where you're having basically just MMA style fights always crossing over with the New Japan stuff. But having Joni Laurer on board doesn't exactly so promising signs for the business. I mean, based on, I can only really go by what Meltzer was writing in the newsletters, but apparently it leads to a lot of bad television and a lot of bad matches. But that's because Chyna was a spectacle, never exactly a great worker.
Yeah, perfectly said.
Other news besides that is that Bradshaw will be out of commission for 6 months due to a bicep tear. So
he's on Raw right now. So is that why he just randomly shows up, teams up with JBL on SmackDown, and then eventually does the JBL stuff?
Yeah, he's just quietly traded over to the SmackDown side of things. He makes his return with Farouk as part of the APA. So at this point in time, we're going to see Farouk a little bit more in the SmackDown Tag Team Title Tournament, but that's kind of the last thing he does before reforming the APA with Bradshaw in. I guess it's a couple of. I think it's he enters immediately into a feud with the Full-Blooded Italians because they help out the Undertaker, who was feuding with them at the time. So that's their return in around about. It's before Vengeance 2003. I know that, but it's not too far, before that point. So that's the end of Bradshaw's run on Raw at the very least. His singles run. He's going to be back into a tag team until obviously the JBL gimmick starts up in 2004.
Well, he definitely to me is one of the synonymous SmackDown superstars. So, good on JBL for getting that break.
So speaking of Raw, let's obviously talk about what Raw was up to. But first of all, we have to take a bit of a glance at the ratings because these are quite interesting. So Raw's ratings, so this will be for the September 9th edition of Raw, is a 3.4. So down from the previous week's 3.6. So they're heading in one direction at the moment. SmackDown's is the very interesting one, a 4.3. So nearly a whole ratings point ahead of Raw, when you judge by realistic ratings, as it were. This is actually SmackDown's highest rated show of this entire journey.
Wow. I wonder why.
So it's clear that there was a lot of intrigue surrounding the Billy and Chuck wedding. This is not by a huge distance because there are a few episodes that hover around. We're entering a period where SmackDown is consistently above the 4.0 range for the next couple of months. It only starts dipping below that when we hit into November, December time, where it starts to take a little bit of a downturn. But yeah, 4.3 is the highest that they will get this entire time. I guess based on those metrics, this is probably the highest viewed episode of SmackDown we're probably going to watch as well.
It's so crazy how much television has changed. If the show got a 4.3 now, it'd be stop the presses. This is an amazing occurrence. This would be a high number these days.
Yeah, popularity it's waned, let's say, in the last 18 years or so.
Yeah.
So what was Raw actually doing, which led to this huge, almost a 1.0 gap? Well, we have a new number one contender for the World Heavyweight Championship in the form of Rob Van Dam. So he became number one contender by winning a fatal four-way match against Chris Jericho, Jeff Hardy, and The Big Show.
Now, is he still the IC champion at this point?
He is still the Intercontinental Champion for this week.
Yeah, because he's gonna drop it to Jericho.
Yes,
right?
very shortly. So next, not to bury the lead too much, but next week is the week that because obviously that's the go home show for Unforgiven. So Rob Van Dam loses his title on the go home show for that, so Jericho can defend it against Ric Flair at Unforgiven.
Now that's peculiar because we see that Hunter ends up working Kane the next week anyway, the next month anyway, and unifying the World Intercontinental Championships. I wonder if that was a plan going into Unforgiven that just didn't pan out.
Well, you think that they might have just wanted to unify the titles on this show,
Yeah,
but then decided to. I guess there's some logic in that. I think they really wanted to do another Jericho Flair match, but it needed to have some sort of incentive behind it. So maybe because obviously Flair had beaten Jericho at SummerSlam, so he was Jericho would have wanted to get his revenge anyway. But maybe giving them the championship as well would give a little bit more emphasis. And maybe they wanted to give Kane something before he faced Triple H for the title anyway, because he's back now among the Raw roster now.
right. So, he stopped the Un-Americans from burning the flag.
Yeah.
And
so maybe they wanted to build him up really quickly to be like, okay, this guy is like the guy that could really beat Triple H. So let's give him the tag titles, let's give him the Intercontinental title, let's have him go on a winning streak, all that stuff.
Now, do you think that this was Triple H's weakest run? Because he's mid-card for a lot of the next upcoming pay-per-views that we're going to see. And really until he gets it back from Michaels in December, I think this is some of the weaker content that Raw ever puts out, hence what we're seeing in the ratings.
Well, I think the entire Triple H run, and I know that there are obviously mixed feelings about it, but I think the entire Triple H run from this point until he drops the title to Chris Benoit at WrestleMania 20 is probably one of the weakest World Championship reigns. It's strong in the sense that he's holds the title when he beats a load of people, but it's weak in the sense that it doesn't get anybody's interest, really.
I think bell to bell, it's a very good Triple H, but he is trying very hard to be Ric Flair, and it doesn't work out as well. And I think retrospectively, a lot of people take umbrage with it as well. That's why you see like a lot of the knocks on the Steiner rivalry and the Booker
Yeah,
T rivalry.
well, it's all the stuff that we can talk about. I mean, obviously, we're going to look a little bit into it when we discuss these things going forward. But when you think about it, his first feud is against Rob Van Dam, we've seen. And Rob Van Dam's obviously a big star, but he's, as we all turn to find out, he's just permanently mid card. Kane, who doesn't win a world championship again until 2010. So he's a permanent fixture in either the tag team or Intercontinental title level. Never really anything beyond that. Then it's the Steiner feud, which is terrible. The stuff with Michaels is obviously great, but that was kind of the level he was at. It's like everything that he does with Michaels is great, and then everything beyond that it's the stuff against Steiner, it's the stuff against Booker T that he should have lost
Or
the
stuff
title.
against Goldberg.
Stuff against Goldberg, stuff against Kevin Nash. It's all pretty, and then it's all very just people that, okay, it sounds cool, but it doesn't lead to a lot of either great matches or great stories beyond, there is one overarching story, which is Triple H is the best, and that's kind of, and after a while that comes a little bit tighter.
I would agree, but I guess I just have a soft spot in my heart for Triple H randomly experimenting with like fuchsia colored trunks and suddenly wanting to be, 1986 Ric Flair.
So other than the World Championship scene, we have William Regal joining the Un-Americans. So they're now a foursome.
Well, did not like this edition, and I think that idea, as good as it was doomed to fail because the people participating just couldn't get behind it.
So he helped the Un-Americans retain the tag team titles in a match against Kane and Bradshaw. So that would be quite interesting to have Kane and Bradshaw as the World Tag Team Champions.
But I think Regal, this is on the heels of his run with Nowinski as his protege, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that was fun. When he was doing the whole besmirched and publicly crying stuff, I got a kick out of that.
This will also eventually lead to the tag team of William Regal and Lance Storm, which obviously there's nothing flashy about that tag team, but I thought they were very, very competent in their roles.
Yeah, fantastic bell to bell. I mean,
yeah. So even though this Un-Americans thing is very short lived, at least it parlayed into that tag team forming. So I kind of appreciate it for that regard.
Sure.
The big talking point for this episode of Raw, though, revolves around three letters: an H, an L, and an A. So this is, I mean, we're already going to be talking about the Billy and Chuck thing, but we could probably spend a good half an hour talking about this as well. But we'll try and keep it a little bit concise. But essentially, for people who are listening that don't know what happened here, so as a cheap ratings ploy, and that was pretty much as discussed on air as much as it was probably behind the scenes, Eric Bischoff said that he was bringing HLA or hot lesbian action to Monday Night Raw. So this involved bringing out two women to the ring, having them basically strip each other, make out a little bit, then tease that they were going to be taking their bras off. Eric Bischoff stops them, says that it's gone on too long. It's actually gone on 3 minutes too long. And then he uses Rosie and Jamal to beat up the two lesbians. And
this is This is the ending segment of Raw.
Yeah, yes, this is pretty much the big. I don't know if it was. I don't think it was the main event segment. I think the world title match was the main event, but this is like the thing that everyone remembered from this show.
My favorite thing about this is Eric Bischoff, to open a segment on Raw, literally says the words, "Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the lesbians."
Well, it was an on-running gag throughout the entire show, was that there was a locker room with the lesbians written on it. And people were just walking past the locker room. Every single interview that a wrestler had, or promo segment, had to mention the lesbians in it. up until that point, they had segments where I think it was like there was going to be a tag team match with Trish Stratus and Torrie against Stacey Keebler and Molly Holly or something to that effect, and Trish and Torrie walk past the locker room with the lesbians, and they just like laugh and giggle, and then they just carry on walking past. It was just every single thing beyond from the moment that Bischoff makes that proclamation in his opening promo is we're going to have lesbians on TV.
So here's the fun part, kids. And wrestling was different back then. But me,
This isn't wrestling.
As a child, I'm thinking this is some kind of new fucking match, because I don't know that they're teasing porn as an 8-year-old child. I'm like waiting for like some new match to form, and then I just see these girls come out and start kind of teasing each other. Wild that this stuff was on the air.
Well, let's put it this way: it wouldn't be on the air much longer because this got WWE in a lot of hot water with TNN. The TNN WWE relationship was always pretty tenuous from the get-go because the ratings, pretty much from the moment they moved to TNN, were just plummeting week to week. So this didn't help matters at all. They expressed essentially they released this statement which says TNN takes serious issue with the content of Monday night's WWE Raw episode and has expressed its deep concern to the WWE. We don't condone the content of this episode, and we will work diligently to ensure that similar occurrences do not appear again on our network.
So what do you think they didn't condone? Do you think it was the over-sexualization of lesbians? Do you think it was the, hey, let's have two massive men beat up these models?
I think the big thing was the violence against women. Although we had seen the previous week Bubba Ray Dudley powerbomb Molly Holly through a table, and they didn't get this sort of response for it. So I think it was a mixture of the exploitation of the lesbians and trying to over-sexualize their product, and then having two massive men destroy these two women who weren't wrestlers. Well, that's another thing that I was going to discuss. They were technically wrestlers, just not WWE wrestlers.
Yeah.
Because essentially they didn't want any of their actual women to be involved in this segment, but they also didn't want to just hire models. They wanted people that could take bumps, obviously, for this segment. So they hit up UPW, which is another like fledgling, smaller wrestling promotion that WWE have ties to. So they picked up two of their valets, Jennifer Lane and Sasha Bryant, and they were.
Never see these two again, I imagine.
Sorry.
We never see them again, I imagine.
No, I think this is it really for them. It was actually a bit sad because Lane's character in UPW was basically her gimmick was surrounding the fact that she wanted women's wrestling to be taken seriously.
Oh.
And she had been appearing in documentaries where she talked about the fact that she doesn't like the over-sexualization of like the divas in WWE, and she would like them to be taken. She doesn't want to move into the same sort of stereotypes that other women have fallen into in wrestling in the past. And then she's called up for this segment, and I guess because it was her big break, she had to just kind of go past her beliefs and just try this out.
Shout out to I don't care how it happened. I don't care if it was Ronda Rousey or if it's pure exploitation of the world today. I'm so glad women's wrestling is where it is today.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that these sort of segments, because these segments don't add anything. They're just pure titillation to appeal. As we've spoken about many times before, wrestling appeals to the lowest common denominator, and it's segments like this that prove it a million times over. Although Raw died in the ratings. It got less ratings than it did the previous week, so this clearly didn't work. Probably due to the fact that WWE has teased this sort of stuff in the past, and they never pay it off. Because they can't, because they're on network television. And so they can't, like, at the moment when like the two lesbians are trying to take their bras off, you're like, no, they're not actually going to do that because they can't. And you know that, and you know deep down they can't, but some people are stupid enough to try and believe it every now and again.
Yeah, what a fucking wild time.
One of the worst things, the fine thing I want to talk about this segment is that, let's say that Jamal and Rosie weren't exactly the lightest touch in the ring at this point in time. So one of Jamal's kicks to Lane caused like her to suffer from bruised ribs because he connected very fucking hard with her.
Yeah.
So this developed a bit of a reputation around those two as being unsafe workers, which would lead on a little bit more into other matches they would have going forward. Obviously, over time, Rosie and Jamal became a lot more seasoned, and as Umaga, I didn't hear anything about Umaga being an unsafe worker. So,
And I mean, Samoans typically are fantastic, and they're some of the best in the world.
I mean, realistically, you shouldn't really be having a 300+ pound guy super kicking a 100-pound woman who's not really a wrestler anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just that's always asking for trouble anyway. So even though Jamal should have been lighter with what he was doing, it's not exactly like I don't think he ever prepared for this kind of situation in wrestling school.
Yeah, I imagine whatever family member trained him didn't say, okay, so here's the deal. You're going to have to, get used to kicking women.
So that's what Raw was up to. So that was a very noteworthy episode of Raw itself. But now we move on to a probably equally, if not more so, noteworthy episode of SmackDown.
And is it wrong that, and this is probably a discussion for today, but the literal answer on air that they said was Eric Bischoff's just mad that SmackDown has these two seemingly gay men that were going to do a commitment ceremony, and he's mad because, well, damn it, what a ratings draw gay people can be. I know, I'll have lesbians. Like, everything about this now feels so disgusting, and I'm sure it felt that way then too. But like, it's mind blowing that they were even considering this at the time.
It is horrifying, but frankly, it's not more horrifying than some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about with the actual wedding itself, because I think that it really says something about attitudes towards this sort of thing. At this point in time, I think attitudes have changed somewhat, but they haven't changed fully enough yet. But the attitudes at this point in time in 2002 is just of the general populace that were watching wrestling at the time is just
the general
crazy.
populace, probably.
Oh yeah, probably the general populace as well, but specifically among the wrestling audience. We'll obviously discuss it when we get into it. So let's just dive straight into it now. We've discussed HLA enough. Let's move on to the September 12th, 2002 episode of SmackDown from the Target Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Brock Lesnar's hometown.
Absolutely. So the first image is an invitation to watch Billy and Chuck's commitment ceremony on the season premiere of SmackDown.
Oh, they love that.
They love that phrase. So then there's a video package hyping the continuation of the Brock Lesnar Undertaker feud, including images and clips of Sarah from her previously in WWE, and I believe they used quite a lot of shots from her. That I don't know what exactly Divas video it was, but one of the Divas bikini videos that she was part of.
Or maybe they just used the other camera angles of the footage that when DDP was talking to her.
It is a mixture of that. I know she definitely appeared in one of those Divas Go to the Bahamas. That
like Divas do Cancun or some shit.
Yeah. It's probably, yeah. So even though she wasn't technically a diva, it was just, I guess, Mark got her a spot on that thing.
Oh yeah, that's never happened. I'm sure he's not the kind of person who would do that.
So we move on to the first match, which we're already starting with some noteworthy talk. Brock Lesnar versus Hardcore Holly. So imagine this being like the third or fourth most noteworthy thing to happen on this show. A guy getting his neck fucking broken. So we have Brock Lesnar versus Hardcore Holly. So there's a lot of signs for Brock Lesnar because it is Minnesota. So, but they're still boos because they obviously use the crowd sweetening. So they're still trying to get Lesnar booed, even though he is clearly getting cheered heavily because 1, he's in his hometown. 2, he's like this over wrecking machine of a WWE champion. And 3, he's fighting Hardcore Holly, who no one really cares about at this point. So it all adds up to Lesnar's getting cheered probably quite a lot in this match, but the crowd they don't want you to think that Lesnar's a babyface at this point.
Which is stupid, but I get it, yeah.
So commentary builds this match over about Holly will give Lesnar a fight, not a wrestling match. Basically, they're building up the story of Lesnar is a world-class grappler and wrestler, that he can't fight the way that the Undertaker will fight him. So this is like now he's giving them wrestlers who are more akin to their brawling style as opposed to actually being bell-to-bell great wrestlers.
That's hysterical given what we know about Brock Lesnar today.
Yeah, absolutely. So Holly pie faces Lesnar as they start throwing punches, with Lesnar then nailing a belly-to-belly throw. Holly at one point drives Lesnar out the ring through the middle rope. And outside in the ring, Lesnar drives Holly back first into the steel post, followed by belly-to-belly on the floor.
Of course.
Lesnar with a delayed vertical suplex. He locks in that bear hug that he used to take out Hogan all those weeks and months ago. But as soon as Holly starts to get free, Lesnar hits a deep back suplex. And now here's the moment that we've been waiting for. Well, for this one. Which is Lesnar hoists Holly up for a powerbomb. But
Holly fucks this up, right?
I don't know who fucks it up, but one of them fucks it up clearly, or both of them fuck it up, because Holly clearly goes up incorrectly. He's sandbagging.
Right, that's the visual I get. That Holly's sandbagging Lesnar and ends up getting dropped, and it looks nasty.
Yeah, so Lesnar either loses grip or just decides he's going to drop Holly right there, and Holly lands right on the back of his head. That is where the neck break happens. So he immediately grabs his neck. This move broke it. He left. Essentially, this will leave Holly out of commission for the next 13 months. Yet this match still goes on for another good 3 or 4 minutes. So Holly somehow manages to continue wrestling. He somehow manages to hit a drop kick. Like, say what you want about Bob Holly, but he's a fucking tough SOB.
Adrenaline, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So he continues to wrestle. He continues to have a short comeback. There are a number of really evident camera cuts during the comeback, which I guess are to try and hide the fact that he probably has to take a few breaks or something to that effect.
I would believe you if it wasn't WWE. It's probably just a camera cut for the sake of the camera cut.
It could be that, but I think there's a lot of stuff that's edited out as well, like through the camera cuts. So after a short comeback, Lesnar hits the F5, pins Holly. And yeah, I guess this match was probably going to be pretty good because they were getting quite physical with each other, as you'd expect with a Hulk or Holly match. But it's just remembered for that one botch, which could have almost cost Hulk or Holly's entire career. But yeah, it does, I guess, parlay into his one and only WWE Championship match on pay-per-view.
If you would like us to watch that match, because I'll be honest, they tried with that match and Hardcore Holly gets nowhere. I would say that would be a fun little Patreon exclusive if we ever get enough, right? I enjoyed stuff like that because it ties into this.
I mean, Royal Rumble 2004 in general is a pretty notable show for a lot of reasons.
Yes.
So yeah, if you wanted to hit us up on the Patreon, obviously there's the Pick Your Poison tier, where you can check out, like, at the $50 tier, where you can get us to watch any show or any match or any segment or anything like that you want us to do. Then if you have the money available and you want us to do that instead, then yeah, sure, hit us up with that. Just as a reminder for the Patreon stuff in general, even $1 goes a really long way to helping out. And if you are at the $10 tier, the Darkcast tier, then you'll be able to listen to all the additional pay-per-view episodes we do of the Paul Heyman SmackDown podcast, including what we've already put up, SummerSlam, Vengeance, and Global Warning from 2002. And coming up pretty soon will be Unforgiven 2002. So make sure if you want to listen to that episode as well, then if you're at that tier or above, then you'll be able to listen to those along with us. Have the full journey. So we move on after this match to Undertaker arrives topless apart from an open biker jacket.
I love that wrestlers travel this way.
Yeah.
Did you ever notice that it's only wrestlers that travel this way?
Yeah. And he's joined by his pregnant wife, Sarah, who is heavily pregnant at this point in time. We move on to the next match, which is Los Guerreros, even though they're not referred to as such at this point. Eddie and Chavo against Edge and John Cena.
That's a tag team. That is a really strange team.
It's interesting to see this dynamic of Edge and Cena because they would be, I mean, they're probably their two biggest rivals. I mean, you can obviously argue John Cena and Randy Orton, or John Cena and Lesnar, or John Cena and Batista among those ones as well. But a lot of people bring up Edge and John Cena as both of each other's biggest rivalries. and they're tagging up here, and it's dynamic of the fact that Edge at this point is a lot closer to the WWE Championship than John Cena is.
Still, Cena gets it first.
Yeah, Cena still gets it first.
Just want to put that out there.
Oh, Cena gets it first, and then makes Edge. Who'd have thought that, like, 4 years later on, that Cena is the one that establishes Edge?
Honestly, that's really odd.
When you just look at this dynamic here, where Edge has been with the company a good 3 years at this point, maybe even longer, and seems to be somebody who's there looking to rise up. Probably, if he hadn't have gotten injured, would have been world champion by about 2003, 2004-ish.
Yeah, maybe he gets the Benoit push or something.
Yeah, maybe. So, Los Guerreros, Eddie's great. Eddie's very intense with this sort of time. They cheap shot Edge and Cena before the bell rings. There's Edge makes a comeback against both opponents. Loud cheers from the crowd. Then Cena gets in the ring and there's crickets. The crowd just doesn't care about John Cena.
Yeah,
in the slightest.
Far change from what we would get later, where the crowd cares so much about Cena they don't care about anything else.
So Chavo drops the top rope when Cena is running towards it, sends Cena flying and gets the heat on Cena. Cena then gorilla presses Eddie over his head, but he's chopped up by Chavo to just extend it a little while. Makes the hot tag to Edge. Edge is a great hot tag, as we all know, because of his work with Christian and any other tag team match he's ever had. He has a spear to Chavo, but he's crotched on the ring post by Eddie. So that was quite an interesting way that they decided to do a double heat segment in this match. So Edge now gets heat on him. Eddie used a diving Hurricane Rana at one point, which was a really nice spot. Cena makes the hot tag again. It's a lot less impressive a hot tag, but, you know, Cena's not exactly the most over at this point in time, as we've discussed. He hits the Protoplex on Eddie, but Chavo breaks up the cover. Edge then misses a spear to Eddie, hits the ring post. Chavo brainbusters Cena. Eddie hits the frog splash, and Los Guerreros get the victory.
Yes, but I think the fun of the match happens after.
Yes, obviously I've discussed the match in detail, but what really happens is the post-match, which is Eddie is already annoyed about the fact that I wanted to discuss this point, and maybe we discuss it a little bit later, but how many of the WWE storylines or SmackDown storylines at this point in time revolves around somebody getting the stink face?
Rikishi is the workhorse, and again, it's that ass of life, Callum.
Yeah, I know, because this and the Benoit Angle feud is all seemingly based around the fact that we got our faces in Rikishi's ass and we're upset about it.
I mean, at least, you know, that is something to be upset about.
Yeah, so they want to get revenge. Eddie wants to get revenge on Edge, so he asks Chavo to pull his tights down, expose his ass, and he's going to put Edge's face into Chavo's ass. But Edge reverses it, sends Eddie face first into Chavo. Chavo doesn't realise this. He's celebrating like, oh god, I'm finally getting one over on Edge. He turns around, like tights around his ankles pretty much. Edge low blow, or Edge just leaves the ring. I thought he was going to spear Chavo, but he just like steps out of the ring and Chavo trips over his own tights trying to get to Edge. So Edge gets even though he lost the match, he gets one over on Eddie with this one as well.
Good stuff here. I think this is the beginning of the kind of comedic Los Guerreros. I liked it. I like that they're tying things together. I don't know if we would see that much continuity these days, but I enjoyed it. One thing I do want to talk about, since we've already discussed, you know, great levels of insensitivity, signs in the crowd during this match that were shown include Mole Latino Heat, as in Mullet Latino Heat, Eddie Guerrero Mows My Lawn, which was a popular sign during that time frame, and Taco Heat.
Yeah, they're not exactly the most culturally
No. This
embracing
is
crowd, are they?
We're just embracing stereotypes, and that's what it is. What it is.
Well, that's what Los Guerrero end up being. Is just a giant stereotype of two Mexican guys that just turn up and try and steal money every time they get an opportunity.
It's incredible.
So after the break, Eddie is backstage dousing himself with water and shouting at Chavo, asking what he was thinking, even though it was Eddie's idea, because Eddie is a great heel. and nothing is ever his fault. So Chavo's trying to profess that he wiped earlier today, so it's not too much of an issue. Eddie's going ballistic, saying if Chavo wasn't his blood, then he'd kick his ass, while Chavo just keeps trying to apologise to him. So, yeah, that was a great extension of this as well. Eddie is everyone hates Eddie Guerrero at this point in time. Eddie Sucks chants are probably some of the loudest chants of any match that you're going to have at this point in time. So this was a really good segment. Just making him just into a bit. He's still intense, but he's still a comedy heel. Heels are there to be laughed at.
Comedy.
Yeah, heels are there to be laughed at.
Yeah, and I think that's probably above all else what gets Eddie to the main event level, that he can do comedy.
So Mark Lloyd goes to Undertaker's locker room. He asks why Undertaker's brought Sarah to the arena tonight after what Paul Heyman said last week. Undertaker just explains that Sarah is here to visit some friends and family in Minneapolis. So he brought her along to the arena. That's when Matt Hardy interrupts.
I love Matt Hardy during this era.
Speaking of comedy heels that are there to be laughed at. So he interrupts, congratulates Undertaker on the pregnancy, saying he plans one day having a Matt Hardy version 2.
And he'd have 3 of them.
Yeah, I assume that he thought it would be later at this point, but that obviously turned out to be.
That happened.
No. Taker tries to calmly walk away, but Hardy grabs him by the arm and keeps talking about his plan to have a kid one day, saying it's tricky because of who his girlfriend is.
Oh.
It'd be more tricky than he actually realizes.
Yeah. That's real good.
Matt tries to walk in to congratulate Sarah, but Taker says that she doesn't need those congratulations. And then he shoves Matt Hardy into another door. Now, Undertaker's a dick, right?
Yeah. But we've talked about this for 2 podcast series now.
Yeah.
Biker Undertaker is a piece of shit.
Yeah. So that's going to lead to a match in the main event. But we'll discuss that a little bit later. What we have to talk about now is the first real segment leading up to this wedding, which is Rico's on the phone about trying to get the wedding cake. He says he needs 2 grooms on the wedding cake. Seems pretty late in the day to be arranging that, don't you think?
Yeah, well, I'd like to, and hopefully say that you wouldn't have this problem today, but you still probably would, depending on who you call. Where apparently the issue is the person is refusing to not top the cake with the bride and the groom, but you've got 2 grooms, and that's the butt of the joke. But I think, and you might agree with me here, he walks into Stephanie's office, and Stephanie says one of the funniest things I've ever heard her say in character.
Yeah, so Rico enters Stephanie's office. He asks her to reconsider attending the ceremony in person. Stephanie says that she's had a lot of bad luck at weddings.
That's hysterical.
Yeah. So obviously Stephanie has failed to marry Test, has been drugged, and forced to marry another man.
And then when she finally was ready to renew her vows in a proper ceremony with Triple H, it's found out that she's lying about being pregnant.
So she doesn't feel like she wants to attend because she doesn't want to be a jinx. As she goes to sit down, Rico starts crying and whining about how everything's going wrong with the singers being stuck in traffic, and there's the cake with we can't get the 2 grooms on it, the flowers aren't correct, etc., and they don't have a witness to appear. So Stephanie essentially relents, says that she'd be happy to be the witness for Billy and Chuck, and Rico hugs and kisses her and then leaves excited because the plan is coming together, as it were.
Yeah.
We'll find out soon. But now something to really get excited about, which is Kurt Angle versus Rey Mysterio Part 2.
What a show.
Now, I bigged this up quite a bit to you, both on the show and behind the scenes, saying that I thought this was as good, if not better, than their SummerSlam match.
I don't know if it's better, but it's definitely as good. It's definitely just, wow. These 2 were banging on all cylinders at the time.
So, before the match, Angle cuts a promo saying that they're
yes, he does.
That they're in Mini, and that's appropriate because he's fighting a Mini in Rey Mysterio. Says it won't be funny what he does to Mysterio tonight after Angle took a stink face last week. He threatens Benoit, saying that if he ever laughs at Angle again, there'll be a union between Angle's fists and his face. And then we have a bit of mistaking words here, where he says that Rey Mysterio is a boy in a man's world, and that Angle loves to play with boys.
Oh God! Wow, the shit that happens on this episode of SmackDown.
I would say, because I've watched a bit in advance going forward, this becomes a running gimmick for Kurt Angle for a little while. But he basically says that Mysterio's a boy and Angle's a man, and he plans to manhandle him tonight.
Yeah.
And then he says that he's going to get on top of Rey Mysterio. And yeah, so basically, the crowd is just laughing constantly as Angle gets angry and angry about his choice of words. Taz and Cole and commentary are bursting out laughing as well. And then he just screams that he's going to kick Mysterio's butt, and he just tries to get him out of there.
Yeah, I'll give Angle credit. He pulls this off like a fucking champion.
There's few people that can pull off this sort of level of promo work than Kurt Angle. But this is right in Kurt Angle's wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But then also in Kurt Angle's wheelhouse is having great matches with people, and this is no exception, because I think this match, I agree with you in saying that I think that the SummerSlam match has a lot of really cool work, a lot of really great wrestling. I think this match has more personality than the match at SummerSlam.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Because there's a lot of comedy early on, which is Angle immediately slamming Mysterio out, wrestles him to the mat, slapping him on the back of the head. Then Mysterio responds to a drop toe hold. He fireman lifts Angle over him at one point. He slaps Angle, chases him around the ring, and then Mysterio does a 619 to avoid Angle, and that sends Angle sprawling to the floor. So it's that's a really good start of okay, we're gonna have a bit of fun with this early on. Then we get into the actual wrestling. So Mysterio with a double spring moonsault, a German suplex that sends Mysterio soaring through the air into a moonsault, landing face first. That was the. I know Angle obviously became a bit of a reputation for starting doing that. He does when he's been German suplexed by people like Benoit and Lesnar going forward. He does do the spot where he moonsaults out of German suplexes, but Mysterio just goes absolutely soaring with this one. It's great to have a guy that's that small to throw around.
Oh yeah, and Rey at this point can fly and is motivated and just all around. I wish this Rey Mysterio would have gotten the WWE Championship. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rey here is flawless almost.
So Angle tosses Mysterio towards the top turnbuckle. Mysterio lands on his feet, immediately moonsaults onto Angle. That was really good timing there. Does a corkscrew dive over the top rope to Angle on the floor. Drops a dime, does a jackknife cover, which Angle counters out of nowhere into the ankle lock. So, more great stuff here. 619 to Angle, dodges the West Coast pop. A follow-up Hurricane Rana does get a long 2 count. And as I've always said, Angle is the greatest at the long 2 count. He just manages to always get his shoulder up at 2.9. Mysterio climbs the top rope. Angle scales it quickly, hits the Angle slam from the top rope, cover, and gets the victory. Great.
I think easily one of the best television matches. And this begins a trend on this series where you're going to see some fucking 5-star TV matches. From now until I would say at least December, you're going to see a handful of 5-star matches that all happen to involve Kurt Angle and or Rey Mysterio.
Yep, there's going to be a lot of great matches to be had involving these two. And we'll just talk about the fact that a limo arrives and they appear to be in the wedding party, but then it just cuts away. And another person that'll be involved in a lot of these great matches, Chris Benoit, is now taking on Rikishi. So this is a rematch from the Gauntlet series. So Rikishi wants to get revenge on Benoit after Benoit attacked him post his match with Eddie Guerrero 2 weeks ago. And so this is an opportunity to get a little bit of revenge.
Yeah, but he had tapped out Rikishi pretty clean last time, so it's going to be a really uphill battle for Rikishi.
Yeah, true. Rikishi overpowers Benoit early on, obviously, as you'd expect. Benoit escapes a belly hold with a headbutt, but then is nailed with a sit-out chokeslam. Nice move by Rikishi. Benoit covers the referee's vision to hit a low blow on Rikishi, starts chopping him down. He applies the crossface, but Rikishi this time is able to power out, performing a catching slam on Benoit. There's also a lot of editing that's been done in this match as well, I noticed. Like, there's a lot of bits where it's quite clear that things are getting cut out, so I think that there might have been a few botches along the way in this one that they decided to edit out of the action. And when you think of...
You think they just got used to doing that with SmackDown, or do you think something really bad happened in this match?
I think they would try and avoid it if it was something that was just no big deal, but I think this match, it shows signs where things just went quite awry. And I thought, well, this is being taped anyway, there's no issue if we just decide to cut a few bits and pieces out. And considering the fact it's Chris Benoit versus Rikishi, I assume most of the botches were on Rikishi's end. Not saying anything bad against Rikishi, but Benoit doesn't really botch that much.
We've already talked about Samoans who can botch.
Yeah. So Rikishi goes up for the Banzai drop, but Benoit stops him and hits an electric chair drop out of the corner on Rikishi. So
that's how fun Benoit's. Shoulders and arms.
Yeah, exactly. He goes up for the headbutt, but he's pushed off by Angle for the DQ. So a match ended DQ with Angle interfering against Benoit. Angle, for some reason... Now, I didn't really understand this entirely, because Angle goes to Angle Slam Rikishi, and I assume that's probably to try and get revenge for the stink face he received last week. But Rikishi kicks him away. Then Rikishi sets Benoit up for the stink face, and Angle grabs both of Benoit's arms on the floor to assure that he takes it and he can't get away from it. And then Angle laughs all the way up the ramp after Benoit's had to take a stink face from Rikishi. So I get that part of it. I just didn't get the point of, like, I guess Angle thought that he was just going to take out both of them, and then when it realised it had gone wrong with him being taken out by Rikishi, thought, well, I'm just going to make the best out of a bad situation here and make sure that Benoit gets embarrassed like I got embarrassed last week.
Yeah, but at least, they're tying it all together. And again, for a guy who gets no WWE Championship matches, or maybe even no championship matches, Rikishi is all over the next few weeks of SmackDown.
Absolutely. So we return, and the ring has been converted into a wedding venue.
Okay. I am already mad at the network for this one. They took out what may be the funniest portion of this, but I don't know, maybe that's a hindsight being 2020 thing. This is the commitment ceremony, and there are singers, and for a good portion of this, they sing it, It's Raining Men.
Yeah, maybe they just couldn't get the rights to it. Maybe they couldn't get the rights to that music.
So unfortunate, because it's the funniest thing, because you've got creepy old man preacher in the ring dancing to It's Raining Men while we prepare for the first ever, as Michael Cole called it, same-sex commitment ceremony in WWE. I'd also like to point out only same-sex commitment ceremony in WWE as of September 2020.
Yeah. So Taz at one point says it's 2002, let's get with the program. So maybe they should have told they should have told the audience about that as well. But before we get to the commitment ceremony, with Benoit is in Stephanie's office, angry about what happened with Angle laughing and him getting stink face. So he demands a match with Kurt Angle, Unforgiven. Before she can respond, Matt Hardy enters, demanding Stephanie's attention as well. Stephanie tells it to wait, accepts Benoit's request, and Benoit says when Angle sees him smile, he'll feel his pain. In a very intense way, which again is not exactly the...
Listen, on the one hand, they're giving Benoit a lot of mic time, and I think that's a Heyman thing, because Heyman understands how to book Benoit promo-wise. He did it in ECW, he gave him the crippler and all that. But man, like for the last 4 weeks or so, every time he opens his mouth, I'm just like, stop talking. It's very cringy, knowing what we know now.
So after Benoit leaves, Matt Hardy demands a match with The Undertaker. And Stephanie says that Taker already has a match with Lesnar at Unforgiven, so Matt says that he wants Taker tonight instead. Stephanie agrees to his request, and Matt Hardy guarantees victory.
Yeah, Matt Hardy is a gem right now.
He's doing very well. He's doing very good stuff. Now it's time for the commitment ceremony, and
yeah, it is.
There is so much to unpack here. So right, how do we discuss this really? So it got a lot of mainstream press, let's put it that way to start with. So Billy and Chuck were appearing on a lot of radio programs, a lot of television shows in the build up to this, because they were trying to treat it as a big deal as possible. Howard Stern. They were meant to appear on a Howard Stern episode. I don't think they ended up appearing on him at one point. But Howard Stern on his radio program basically said, just like crapped all over this idea, saying that this isn't what the audience wanted to see. If they think that they want to see this, they're out of touch. ESPN's Tony Kornheiser, I believe that's how you pronounce it, said it was like a desperate ratings grab. There was a lot of negativity, but there was also some positivity about it, with especially from the people that were kind of on WWE side at this point in time, which is glad.
Yeah. So, were they on their side after this week? This is a pretty bad week.
Not on this side at this point in time, but it's essentially they thought this was they'd been given assurances by WWE that this was a putting like homosexuality in a positive light on a television show, and that sort of presentation wasn't going to be taken for granted. And
well, no, in fairness, Billy and Chuck did say they have nothing wrong with gay people.
We will get to all of this stuff. So they got some positive mainstream press about being like a progressive organisation in its treatment of the subject of homosexuality. The company was given credit. Stephanie McMahon was given credit as the head writer of the show. So they were all more than willing to take all of this positive goodwill towards them. So before we get into the actual meat of what happened as well, I have to mention about that there was a tremendous amount of sign confiscation at the door before this show took place. Because
how many F-word signs did we have?
Oh, I don't even want to calculate how many it was, but I can tell you that this is probably, you can even tell by around like how bare the audience is in terms of signs in comparison to a lot of weeks, that there was a lot of people that decided to try and use this opportunity to let their voices be heard about how they felt about this ceremony and the whole thing it represents in the first place. And so whether they were joking, whether they were serious or not, it doesn't really matter. Essentially, a lot of people had signs confiscated based around what they were saying about this event.
You know, God, this podcast is so full circle because we now live in an era of the Thunderdome and lots of banning and confiscation in the virtual form because wrestling fans cannot be trusted with anything remotely decent.
Mm.
I listen, I appreciate our fans. I know that we're all a wrestling fan community, but a lot of wrestling fans are just like really scummy at the core, and I don't know why. And I can't imagine in 2002 the shit that was being written on signs.
Yeah, it was probably very extreme, but obviously we don't have any genuine examples of it so far, so we can't really say what was being said, and I don't even know if I would want to say it anyway because of some of the stuff that would probably be written down. But let's move on to... Oh, go ahead.
I will say this. I don't know. I'm sure Stephanie McMahon then and now and forever would probably consider WWE a progressive organization. I'm not sure I would extend that courtesy to them today, let alone in September of 2002. They were not a progressive organization. This seems like the beginning of the philanthropy is the new marketing that we often see today.
Yeah, I imagine so. And it was also, I guess they were trying everything at this point to try and turn around the ratings decline. So this was the route they decided to try here, and at least for 1 week it worked. But let's talk about let's get into this really, because we've already explained a little bit of the circumstances surrounding it. But Rico comes out, he badmouths the singers' outfits to their face. They don't break from smiling, so obviously they weren't exactly paid actors for this moment in time. He continues to complain about like every single aspect of the decorations, saying that the flowers are wrong, the arch looks terrible, all this other stuff. They return from the break. Rico, Stephanie, Billy, and Chuck are all in the ring, as is the Justice of the Peace, which is a very, very old man who talks very slowly with a hunch. And yeah, so Billy and Chuck says their vows. The crowd looks utterly bored throughout this entire thing, and there are very, I guess, audible, sustained boos during this entire segment.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Billy says that he first only knew Billy as being a tag team specialist and as Mr. Ass, while staring at Billy's ass, and says that Billy captured his heart, and the crowd boos heavily.
Oh.
Billy,
Go ahead.
Yeah, Billy says that was corny, but then he gives Chuck a ring to symbolize him as Billy's permanent tag team partner.
Yeah. I just want to just. There's so much wrong about this.
Yeah, we'll
then
get
there's
there.
also just Billy Gunn has had an interesting career. Let me just I'll leave it there.
So Rico shares a montage video of Billy and Chuck's love story, just showing loads of clips from the previous few months that they were together. Rico asks for applause and the crowd boos. So the Justice Peace asks if anybody has any objections. And then after a few seconds, out comes the Godfather with some of his talent surrounding adorning him on the ramp. So previously, before they decided to go with the Godfather, they had been in contact with both the Honky Tonk Man and the Road Dogg to appear on this show.
I would have loved a reference to Rockabilly. I mean, like, Road Dogg makes sense. I can see where they're going, but I had to think about it for a second with the Honky Tonk Man.
Yeah, so both of them refused to appear. So they decided to go with the Godfather instead, because
they couldn't get a hold of Bart Gunn?
No, I guess he
would have been funny.
Maybe they were worried about the fact that if Bart Gunn appeared that nobody would just know who he was.
And that's fair, actually.
Yeah. So Godfather is joined by some of his hoes, and Taz says that's enough to turn you straight. Again, very very accepted at the time.
Holy shit! Like,
because really, we all know that gay people, all we need is enough hot women, and then they just turn straight. It's just that's how it works.
I mean, honestly, how has nobody figured this out yet? Wow. So, had this been a few years later, and maybe you know where I'm going here, the obvious trajectory of jokes about Billy Gunn going from a cowboy to an ass man to Billy and Chuck would have been right in front of everybody's face with all the stuff after Brokeback Mountain. I really feel like WWE must have been high-fiving. This shit is hysterical. Oh, we got him. Now, everybody plays their role here very well. I'll say that. Billy's good here. Chuck is the best thing Chuck ever does, I think. The Justice of the Peace is fantastic. But man, this is so cringy and so like, okay, in the early 2000s we had shows like Will and Grace and stuff like that, and I think Queer Eye was either starting or about to start. But like, it's very clear to me that this is still an era of like, oh no, we're okay with gay people existing, but they are the joke.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way you can put it. Really, the idea of, okay, we're fine them being around. We just either don't want to see them,
or we have to make fun of them.
Yeah, or they're like you say, they're the butt of the joke. And so Godfather says he's back in business. He's here to stop the ceremony, saying the truth is Billy is a pimp, and the ladies liked him so much that they were giving it away for free in the past with him, and that Chuck was also a great skirt chaser, but he was more inclined towards the heftier ladies. Because, you have to make him look like he's a chubby chaser because he's a joke.
Well. Yeah, I guess. Like, I don't even know why they had to go there.
I know. They just decided to do that, to just make a joke of the situation. So Godfather asks what the hell is going on here. And Rico says that no one wants to see Goodfather and his good time girls, he calls them. That was a great line.
Fantastic.
Tells him to leave, and Godfather says to Rico that he doesn't know what he's missing, because Rico's also gay, and because he's never been with a woman, if he had been with a woman once, he wouldn't be gay.
No, maybe that explains the Jackie Gaina stuff we'll see in 6 months or something like that.
So Rico says that he wants to just get this to the end. Well, this is really starting to drag on at this point. It's going on. I know what you're saying that this is like entertaining to a degree, but it's also going on for fucking ever. It's just it's a really, really long segment. So Justice Place asks Billy if he wants to commit himself to Chuck. Billy looks very unsure at this point about what to say before he eventually says yes. He then asks Chuck. Chuck tries to talk to Rico, who just tells Chuck to do it, and Chuck also says yes. But before the Justice of Peace can pronounce them as husband and husband, Billy and Chuck both stop it, saying it wasn't meant to go this far. It was just a publicity spot, and they're not gay. And this is the moment that I really want to talk about, because as soon as they say that they're not gay, the crowd loses their absolute shit.
They go fucking insane
because they're not gay. Because they're not gay, they are now the biggest baby faces on this show.
It's fucking wild. Literally, all they do is, "Ayo, this wasn't supposed to go this far. We're not gay." Yeah, like what? I mean, it's this and Linda McMahon standing up at WrestleMania 17 for the two most ridiculous pops I have ever heard in WWE.
So this mirrors something from quite a few years ago at this point. It's like probably about 5 years ago, with the Jerry the King Lawler and Goldust segment, where essentially Jerry the King Lawler makes fun of Goldust because he thinks that he's queer, and so Goldust at one point just says, "I'm not gay," and that's is eventually marks his babyface turn. The fact that he is not gay makes him a babyface.
They were very excited to be like, Dustin Rhodes is coming out of the closet, but not in the way you think. WWE and maybe wrestling in general, they have a very odd relationship with homosexuality. Like, they're cool with Pat Patterson being gay, but if you watch old stuff featuring like the Brooklyn Brawler and stuff, they love making jokes underhandedly about his sexuality. It's just like a very bizarre world.
Yeah, so Billy then says that if you like you say, he says that there's nothing wrong with gay people. He says that if he was gay, he probably would marry Chuck. But Rico then berates them for backing out at the last minute. Justice of Peace then interrupts them, saying that the love Billy and Chuck have is sacred, saying it doesn't matter if it lasts 50 years, 16 months, or 3 minutes. And then his voice changes dramatically to say, "Did I just hear myself say 3 minutes?" He eventually pulls off his face. It takes a little bit of effort to do that in the first place, but reveals Eric Bischoff. Rico then low blows Billy Gunn. Bischoff grabs Stephanie, and then Jamal and Rosie enter the ring. They destroy the set. They decimate Billy and Chuck, and then Eric Bischoff sends Stephanie into Jamal. Jamal does a Samoan drop, takes out Stephanie. They hold Stephanie down for the big splash by Rosie, but they're all chased out of the ring by Edge, Mysterio, and Cena. Angle comes out to check on Stephanie. More SmackDown superstars, heel and babyface, come out to make sure that the ring is protected and those guys have been chased out of the building. So that is the big closing angle of this thing, is that Stephanie got taken out by Bischoff and Raw, and we have an invasion angle.
I will say this leads to like the most lackluster match in history of it's just Billy and Chuck against Rosie and Jamal at Unforgiven. But this wedding segment highlights so much of 2002 WWE, so much of really if you watch the Ruthless Aggression documentary on the network, they tell you how we had stopped pushing the envelope in unique ways and we were just being crude to be crude. This is being crude to be crude, and this is really, really bad. But at the same time, you have to ask yourself, Callum, maybe this wedding would have gone off without a hitch had Stephanie not just shown up like the jinx that she apparently is.
Yeah, maybe that would be the case. But I mean, the whole thing is that Rico wanted her out there because he knew what the plan was. He's jumping to Raw now, so This is the last we see of Rico on SmackDown.
Oh yeah, and I still to this day never understood the point of putting Rico on Raw with Rosie and Jamal.
Well, eventually that partnership doesn't last too long, and he eventually breaks out on his own and gets his own gimmick with the Jackie Gator stuff, as we've spoken about. But let's talk a bit about the fallout from this. So the reports were that the live crowd absolutely hated this segment because it went on too long, and they didn't want it to happen in the first place. But then as soon as Billy's revelation that they're not actually gay came out, then it kind of just turned the entire segment on its head for the crowd, who then just loved every bit of it. It apparently went on far too long, which is why the Undertaker Matt Hardy main event ended up being rushed very quickly. It was supposed to go on a bit longer, that match. So the key was that they had to establish that they were straight before they got the babyface turn, which again is what we've spoken about, is the fact that essentially WWE are putting the message out there that they couldn't be both gay and baby faces, because that was never going to work.
So we live in an era now, right? Like we have Sunny Kisses on AEW, right?
Mm.
And Sonya Deville is or was openly gay, but that wasn't a part of her character. Sunny Kiss is openly gay, but that's not a part of their character. I, I just think it's wild to me that it's taken till now to kind of get like, okay, yeah, they can be gay, and that doesn't have to be this defining character element, and it's also not used for cheap heat.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that is accepted. Like people don't. I don't see many attempts to just like. I assume there are still people out there, because there are plenty of people that are dicks on the internet that will say stuff about Sunny Kiss or Sonya Deville or Jake Atlas or anybody else who's
Or Nyla Rose, and
yeah.
it's out there, but
Yeah, but it's a lot more muted than it previously was at this point. Especially at this point in time, like I don't imagine that there'd be a huge positive outpouring if like Nyla Rose came out and said, "I wasn't actually a man in the first place," and then people would just like start just cheering and going crazy at this point in the crowd or whatever. But essentially, this just led out to just be a publicity stunt. This led to a lot of negative feedback towards WWE, particularly from the Glad. They said they were played for fools. But then again, they were fools because they didn't watch this segment when it first aired. So they continued to plug this segment on SmackDown replays, like saying that, oh, there's a replay of this scene coming up, without actually realizing what had happened on the show. So they continued to promote it, even though when they actually did get around to watch it, they hated every second of it. So that's one of the head people at Glad spoke to an interview on gay.com, and that is the name of it. Don't that doesn't just me coming up with a random thing off the top of my head. Yeah,
that's a real place.
So the WWE lied to us 2 months ago when they promised that Billy and Chuck would come out and wed on the air. In fact, I was told the day after the show was taped in Minneapolis that the wedding took place and all was well. So apparently they felt betrayed at the end of this. That kind of severed the relationship with WWE beyond this point. John McClellan, the columnist at Outsports.com, called the television angle a disaster for Glad. So this guy to proclaim to the Washington Post that this storyline and wedding is a hoot, and that it reaches a lot of potential bullies and gay bashers out there. And what Billy and Chuck are saying is not only we're here, but also say don't mess with us, is absurd. So basically, this message that this guy's putting out of like, oh, this is what this wedding is all about. It's all about like, we don't have to be scared, or don't have to say like gay people have a place in society and they're not just outcasts or anything like that. And what WWE is doing is basically
making them the outcast and making it like, it's good, we're not gay.
Yeah, it's like the reason to celebrate them and to think that they're good people is the fact that they're not gay, and that's just complete opposite of what I assume the glad people were hoping out of this. So I want to finish off with this statement that Meltzer puts in the Observer, because I think it encapsulates it quite well, this sort of time frame of wrestling. So pro wrestling books based on stereotypical conceptions of what they perceive as the beliefs of redneck Americans. Foreigners are easy heat, as we've seen with the un-Americans, particularly if they're anti-Americans. Gays are easy cheap heat, so are arrogant rich people, so is insulting the local sports franchise or wearing a jersey of whomever their current rivals are. So what is Metal is basically encapsulating here is, especially at this point in time, and it's a bit more nuanced now, but to its fundamental core, wrestling is very, very basic. There are so many ways to get really easy heat with people. And at this point in time, if you are not American, then it's easy for you to get heat against Americans. If you're gay, then it's easy for you to get heat by just expanding on that part of your character. If you're rich, it's easy to piss off like redneck working class Americans. If you in sport your local sports team, then that's an easy way to just get booed. As Elias still pretty much did throughout his entire heel run as well.
But you know what? It works.
It works. It works all the time. And that's the issue. The issue is not... I mean, part of the issue is WWE continues to do this, but the issue is that they do this because it works. And that means that it's more of a societal problem than a WWE problem.
And I would argue that now, like, if you look at the current 2020 independent wrestling scene, yes, now it is very social justice oriented and very pro-LGBT, pro-black, but that is the independent scene now. And maybe you can argue, you know, wrestling fans as a whole, so even people who watch WWE. But I would still argue that if WWE was running live events today, the average fan going to the show, not the diehard, the average fan, would still probably pop for, it's good, we're not gay, you know, because the average fan is just the guy who wants to get mad that you know, ragged on my sports team. And
I mean, yeah, we said. I know we're repeating stuff we said, but look who's in the White House. Look who's prominent in politics or who's prominent. Look who's on Fox News. Look and all that other stuff. It's obvious that there is still a market for these. Again,
right, it very much still exists, and I think even though we have progressed a lot as a society, the echo chamber doesn't allow people to see that stuff like this still exists. So what I'm saying is, yes, even though this is terrible in 2002, we still had a long way to go, and this was actually quite normal for network television in 2002.
Absolutely. So I think we've covered that in pretty close detail. There's so much more we could go into here, but there's a lot more that you can obviously read up on it as well. But I think we can tie a bow on that one, really. So that is the segment that basically drew the biggest audience that SmackDown will get for this entire run. I guess you could say that gay people were a draw then, at this point in time. Maybe I'm surprised they didn't go full tilt with it going forward then. But
I'm surprised that we haven't seen anything genuinely like pop up from that, because we surely by now I think we could have seen a storyline with an LGBT character or just like a straight up gay character. I'm surprised we haven't.
There's plenty of people in WWE that are either gay or bisexual or anything to that effect. But I guess they just don't want to use that as a crutch, or try and or something that might potentially draw controversy if they were to.
Maybe they feel like they can't do it without relying on, easy tropes from the past, so they just avoid it altogether.
I mean, we've heard rumors about these sort of angles potentially coming up for quite a while. I mean, mainly on the women's side of things, we've heard stories about Paige and AJ Lee, or Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville, or Peyton Royce and Billie Kay. Just a lot of people just like saying maybe it's just fans hoping and praying maybe something like that, because I assume there's still some horny teenage boys that watch professional wrestling or watch WWE still, just hoping that this stuff will happen. But it's just there are people that want this thing to happen, but they want it done in a certain way, like very tastefully. But maybe WWE just doesn't want to open themselves up to that controversy just yet. Like you say, at the moment, their sexuality has no bearing on what their character is like.
Right, and I guess as long as we've gotten there, that's a victory.
So let's move on to another thing that this era is very well versed in, which is Divas Wrestling. Torrie Wilson versus Nidia.
Out of the fryer and into the frying pan, huh, Cal?
it's kind of hard to really transition. I kind of felt like that this was like WWE just saying like, okay, we got the gay segment out of the way. Here's some hot women. And that's basically like, okay, you sat through that entire thing, and now you get to
here's your reward,
enjoy.
kids. You went to the dentist. Here's your lollipop.
Yeah. So Torrie Wilson versus Nidia. Noble is banned from ringside after getting involved in their previous match. This match goes about less than 2 minutes, so it's still really sloppy. Torrie at some point is left bleeding from the mouth. Really sloppy spot in the corner where Torrie is meant to leap over Nidia, but it takes about 30 seconds for them to actually do it. Torrie hits the one move that she can do, which is a swinging neck breaker, and wins the match.
Yeah. SmackDown women are in a shitty spot because they have no belt. They don't really wrestle well, but they still have to be featured on the show in like a token sense. So you're going to get this match.
Yeah, so Torrie's hand is raised, and then immediately the camera cuts to Undertaker telling Sarah he'll be back soon. So that's clearly a sign that this wedding segment went on way too long, and so
and that's with the benefit of editing.
Yeah, so we're going to just cut this out and just keep going. So Matt Hardy knocks on Brock Lesnar's door and asks them if they're ready, and they accompany him down to the ring. So Matt Hardy, for this match with The Undertaker in the main event, is accompanied by both Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman.
Very good pairing. Very, very fun.
Yeah, because obviously Lesnar and Heyman know that Hardy is a geek, that they're going to exploit to try and mess with The Undertaker a little bit. So this is the debut of Matt Hardy's Live for the Moment thing.
Odd match to debut it on, but I guess he's living for the moment and getting a shot at The Undertaker.
Well, it's I mean, it's a good time to do it. It's the main event of SmackDown. This is probably one of the only main events that Matt Hardy will get in this run on SmackDown. So, especially with a guy like The Undertaker who's going to be fighting for the WWE Championship soon. So I think that's a good time to bust out a new theme music. He looks like such a dork next to Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, but who wouldn't? Really, who wouldn't?
Yeah, that is the character at this point. So Taker throws his shirt at Lesnar on the floor, who doesn't budge. Heyman keeps trying to tries to interfere basically from the get-go. He keeps jumping on the apron, he keeps trying to get involved straight away. Taker dominates Hardy, hits a power slam early. The referee finally throws Heyman out after several distractions. Again, this is probably due to the fact that wedding segment going long, so Heyman basically had to get all of his interferences that were planned into it out in the first minute of the match. So Heyman gets thrown out. This allows Hardy to low blow Taker and take advantage for a little while. Lesnar distracts Taker, letting Hardy knock him to the floor, where Lesnar nails a clothesline to Undertaker. Referee kicks out Brock Lesnar as well, so Hardy's now there on his own. He's in control, but he's showboating a lot because he is a dork at this point. Taker blocks the twist of fate and decapitates Hardy with a clothesline. Taker starts making his comeback, but during this time, the camera on the Titantron appears to show Paul Heyman has appeared in Sarah and The Undertaker's locker room. And this is creepy as fuck. Because this is Paul Heyman coming on to a heavily pregnant Sarah. I know Heyman has basically established himself as a lech throughout his run here. Well, essentially his entire run in WWE. Yeah, pretty much his life as well. But especially with his run in WWE, with the stuff that he's done with Lita and Trish and previous things as well, and the stuff that he did while on commentary, the stuff that he would say about the women. So he comes on Sarah saying that after Lesnar is done with him, he won't have your child won't have a dad, but I'll be there to be a dad if you want me to. That sort of creepy shit. So Taker sprints backstage. He gets counted out, so Matt Hardy beats The Undertaker officially in this match. So that's something.
Now, in real life here, I believe both Heyman and Lesnar are actually expecting their first children. Because I know that by the following WrestleMania, they have little children. So this is all they're creeping all the way around by Heyman to be doing what he's doing. But go on.
So Taker sprints backstage, he grabs Heyman by the throat, but then is nailed in the head with a steel chair by Brock Lesnar. Again, chair shots to the head, different time. A lot of this is this is maybe the most 2002 episode of this show we've ever seen. Yeah. Lesnar backs Sarah up against the wall, puts his hand on her pregnant belly, says life's a bitch.
That's a Vince McMahon.
Yep. Before skulking away with Heyman as Sarah goes to check on the Undertaker, and that's how the episode closes with Taker laid out with his pregnant wife checking on him, and yeah, that's the end of this very, very noteworthy show.
There is. So in this show, we got jokes about pedophilia. We got a bunch of gay jokes. A big pop for babyfaces not being gay. Paul Heyman coming onto a pregnant woman, and then Brock Lesnar touching that pregnant woman's stomach and saying, "Hey, life's a bitch."
Yeah, so I don't really know what to say about this show. I can't say that I liked this show beyond the Angle Mysterio match. The continuation of the feud with Benoit is fun. Like, that feud is enjoyable, and so I'm liking that side of things. But again, I think the Undertaker, Sarah, Brock Lesnar, Paul Heyman stuff is a little bit disturbing.
Yes.
And maybe that's the point of it. Maybe that's what I'm supposed to feel. But I feel like it's adding an element to this feud that I don't think was necessary.
I think I'd be okay with it if the rest of the show wasn't so disturbing. Like you said, this was a very, like, you could keep looking at the whole show and just go, different time.
Yeah, I mean, you
I
kind of
mean,
have to.
even the Benoit stuff, like even the whole, like, yeah, when I'll smile when he feels my pant, like, so much of it is just like makes your skin crawl by the end of it.
Yeah, this is a show that I can't say I'd recommend watching to an extent. I mean, there's something like, if you're fascinated by it and you haven't watched it already, then check it out. But try and look at it in the context of this is a very, very different time, and we have progressed, as we've spoken about many times. But I think it's almost important that people recognise that this is where WWE have come from in the past and what they have resorted to. Because I don't want to say like, oh, you should hate WWE because of segments like this, but you should realise that WWE is not perfect. The WWE
But they're
has
a
made
lot better.
they have made they've gone a lot better. They have made mistakes, and I mean, a lot of stuff that they have done in the effort to try and boost ratings or get people's attention or get people talking has been very morally questionable. But then you also have to take a look at the fact that they
It
did these
works.
things. Yeah, they did these things, and it worked, and the crowd got excited by the, like, I guess the finish of that, or the big reveal of the segment. And that is a more of an indictment on the people who watch wrestling as it is on the people that create this wrestling content.
I think all too often it's too easy to crap on WWE without realizing exactly that. Hey, they're playing to their fan base the same way any other, you know, media entity would.
Mm.
And hey, it works for them.
Yeah, it's not. I guess it's not their fault that they're. I mean, now I guess with the ratings so low and with viewership a lot lower than it previously was, now is the time to, and they are doing it, to adjust and be more socially responsible or socially conscious than they have been in the past. But at this point in time, where they were desperately trying to get the ratings all the time, they were appealing as heavily as they could to that denominator of people that were watching in the Attitude Era, and this stuff was rife throughout the Attitude Era anyway. So this is the sort of stuff that got them
Mark
huge
Henry
ratings.
and a transvestite, anybody?
Yeah, no, exactly. This is stuff that got them huge ratings in the past. So it's hard to really look at it and say that WWE at this point in time is good. I mean, the wrestling's good and all that other great stuff we've spoken about on SmackDown. We've raved about how much we're enjoying a lot of what they're doing right now. But you also have to put in the context that a lot of the stuff they're doing right now is incredibly insensitive in 2020 eyes, and we can't lose sight of that. It's people are complex and different situations are complex. This isn't black and white. We can appreciate the wrestling and some of the storylines, some of the great feuds that have been coming out at this point in time, and also lambast this period as being like really like out of touch, bad with the times, just like not like really making a huge deal out of stereotyping and minorities and using them as the butt of your jokes.
Here's what I'll say. You can watch Gone with the Wind and understand that Gone with the Wind is incredibly insensitive to a modern time, but still understand that Gone with the Wind is a piece of cinema that has won many, many awards over the years and at the time broke box office records.
Yeah, there is, again, it's different shades of grey. But that's pretty much the end of this episode. So that was again a very noteworthy one, and one we got quite a lot of discussion out of. So hopefully you enjoyed it. If you have, like I said previously, if you're watching on the YouTube and you have a lot of thoughts about this as well, if you remember this segment, this episode, or the Billy and Chuck segment, and you want to share your thoughts about it, then drop a comment below. Let us know what you thought about this. Let us know what you thought about our thoughts about it and this episode in general. What can we have to look forward to next week? Well, next week is the Unforgiven Go Home show. So there are a few matches on there. We have a match between Brock Lesnar and John Cena.
Yeah, we do.
To look forward to from a very, very different time in both of their careers. We have a main event of, well, it's not really a main event match, but it's a main event segment involving The Undertaker and Brock Lesnar, and Matt Hardy gets involved again, but we'll talk about that when we get around to it. We have a lot of build towards what Apple mentioned, Billy and Chuck versus Rosie and Jamal match at Unforgiven, including the stipulations that are attached to that match. But we will talk about
Interesting stipulations.
We have a tag team match with Billy and Chuck against Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit prior to their match at Unforgiven. So get to see hopefully a bit of good wrestling alongside all of the Unforgiven build as well. So that's what to look forward to on next week's show, which will obviously be out the following Saturday. So hopefully you're enjoying all of these and you're staying tuned for everything.
Yes, and that is it's a rare pay-per-view free week, as was this one. So we hope you're enjoying the breaks from like the All Out discussion and stuff like that, and just really sitting down and get into this conversation in the YouTube comments. And because this was probably my favorite podcast that we've done, just because it allows such a good look back and different introspective thoughts on where we were and where we are. So this is it for the 12th. I know next week is the 19th, and then the following weekend we'll have all your Clash of Champions stuff. But for this one, just really enjoy the discussion and the breakdown of where we were in 2002.
Absolutely. So we'll just leave you with a few plugs. So we've already mentioned the Patreon. If you are able to give a bit of spare change your way through that, then please do. There's also the Redbubble and TeePublics, where you can also buy some merchandise, some Smark Out Moment merchandise. Check out the website for all the great articles, like news, all the weekly stuff we have going out there. You can use that to keep on touch with the Fantasy League, which is up and running now. See where everyone's standings are, see what everyone's teams are looking like now. If you want to start up your own Fantasy League, all the rules will be up there as well. You can check out Smark Out Moment on Facebook, Twitter, all the other social media places. Join the Mega Maniacs. You'll get updates for the Fantasy League there as well as being able to share a few memes or discussion points for pay-per-views and stuff like that with other like-minded wrestling fans. Fanboys Anonymous, the blue brand that Tony runs with the geek culture side of things. So if you're interested in anything related to movies or comic books or video games, you want to check that stuff out. It has its own Patreon, has its own Redbubble and TeePublic merch. Check out the website, check out the articles on there. Rob, you want to throw out a few bits and pieces?
Yeah, as always, keep up with Fightful.com and WrestleZone.com for your daily wrestling news needs. Check out everything Tony's got going on Bleacher Report, eWrestling News, and all that good stuff. You can follow me on Twitter at DeFelice. And thank you, and keep on supporting. Take advantage of the new YouTube community functions. If you're not a fan of Patreon for whatever reason, you can also become a fan on YouTube. You get exclusive emojis and things of that nature. And there will be exclusive house show features coming to the YouTube channel. I know Tony has started to tease that, hasn't really broken it down as of yet. So stay tuned to everything we've got going on. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for coming on this journey. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.
Absolutely. You can follow me on Twitter at Wigmeister14. And that's about it. So thanks for listening to this episode, and we hope you enjoy the next one and all the other ones we have coming forward in the months ahead. But for now, this has been another Smark Out Moment, and we are being counted out.